Hello everyone. Today I've got a brand new series of spine-chilling horror stories for you. I'm really curious to know which corner of the world you're listening from. Let me know in the comments below. Now, let's get started. A few months ago, 3 friends and I decided to go on a hiking trip to a remote national park. We all enjoyed outdoor activities and thought that a trail rarely traveled by others would be the perfect adventure. The path was barely marked on the map, and it seemed like it hadn't been used for years. But that's what excited us. It felt like we were going into the unknown. We set out early in the morning, backpacks filled with enough food and water for the day. As we hiked, sunlight filtered through the trees, and the chirping of birds and the gentle breeze created a peaceful atmosphere. The first part of the journey went smoothly, and we all enjoyed the serenity of nature. However, as we ventured deeper into the forest, the air started to feel heavier, and the sounds of nature gradually faded. Around 2 p.m., we noticed a fresh set of footprints on the ground ahead of us. It looked like someone had recently passed through. At first, we didn't think much of it. Maybe another hiker had taken the same path earlier in the day. After all, despite the remoteness of the trail, others could still explore it occasionally, just like us. But as we continued walking, the footprints remained in front of us, stretching further down the trail, yet we never saw anyone ahead. As the sun began to set, we decided to camp in an open area we found along the path. It was a quiet valley surrounded by dense trees. We set up our tents and started a fire to prepare dinner. While everything seemed normal on the surface, there was an uneasy feeling hanging over us. Those footprints kept coming up in conversation, and although we tried to joke about them, none of us could shake the underlying tension. After dinner, we sat around the campfire for a while. The sky had gone completely dark, and one of my friends remarked how unnervingly quiet the area was. There was no wind, no chirping of insects, no distant animal sounds. It was as if the forest had fallen into a deep, unnatural silence. By the time it was fully night, 2 of my friends decided to call it a day and went to sleep. Another friend and I stayed up, taking turns keeping watch. Around midnight, we heard faint footsteps outside the camp. They were soft but clear, the unmistakable sound of someone or something moving around in the dark. We froze, scanning the area with our flashlights, but saw nothing. The footsteps continued intermittently, like someone circling our camp. A chill ran down my spine as I felt my heart start to race. My friend whispered, "Do you think it's the person who left those footprints? Why are they hiding?" We exchanged nervous glances, both unsure what to do next. Just as we were debating whether to wake the others, the footsteps stopped. The eerie silence returned. We sat there, gripping our flashlights tightly, our eyes scanning the darkness, but nothing happened. Everything was still. Eventually, we decided it was best to stay alert but not panic. We kept watch for the rest of the night, alternating between nervous conversation and long stretches of silence. By dawn, we were all exhausted, but we had made it through the night without any more disturbances. As the sun rose, everyone emerged from their tents, looking tired and uneasy. We quickly ate breakfast and began packing up our gear, eager to continue hiking and leave the unsettling night behind. As we were packing, one of my friends noticed something strange. "Guys, come here," he said, pointing to the ground. His voice was shaky. Surrounding our tents were fresh footprints, lots of them. They weren't ours. Someone had walked around our campsite during the night, circling the tents over and over again. The tracks led off toward the valley, but just like before, they abruptly disappeared into nothing. We stood there in stunned silence. Who had been walking around our camp while we slept? Why hadn't they shown themselves? The realization that someone, or something, had been watching us all night without making their presence known filled us with dread. Although we hadn't heard anything else strange, the tension in the air was palpable. We quickly packed up and made the unanimous decision to abandon our original plan and head straight back to the trailhead. As we hiked back, we couldn't stop talking about the footprints, trying to make sense of what had happened. But no explanation seemed to fit. When we reached the base of the mountain, we spoke with some locals about our experience. They told us that the trail had a bit of a strange reputation. Years ago, a few hikers had disappeared in that area, and their bodies were never found. No one could explain the source of the footprints, but we all left the trail with an unshakable feeling of being followed. Even now, I sometimes think back to that night, wondering who or what left those tracks. It's as if the owner of those footprints never left, still lurking in the forest, watching anyone brave enough to set foot on that forgotten trail. My girlfriend and I decided to celebrate our anniversary by going on a 2-day hike in a remote mountain area, looking forward to some peaceful time in nature. We chose a secluded trail that promised beautiful views, but the route was long, so we planned to camp in the mountains for one night. The first day went smoothly. The weather was perfect, the mountain air was crisp, and the scenery was breathtaking. We took our time, snapping pictures along the way and enjoying the quiet wilderness. We didn't encounter anyone else on the trail, and it felt like the whole mountain was ours. After hiking for about 6 hours, we arrived at a valley surrounded by tall trees and the fresh scent of pine in the air. It seemed like the perfect spot to set up camp for the night. My girlfriend and I pitched the tent, started a small fire, and made dinner as the temperature began to drop. Above us, the sky was clear, and the stars shone brightly. Everything was going well, until the next morning. When we woke up, we found a backpack sitting near our camp. It looked brand new, as though it had just been placed there. What was strange was that we had thoroughly checked the area the night before, and there was no sign of this backpack. At first, we assumed it belonged to another hiker who might have passed by and accidentally left it. We opened it up and found some basic hiking gear and food, but no personal items, no ID, phone, or anything that would identify the owner. It felt unsettling, as if someone had left it there on purpose, but never returned. We decided to continue our hike and left the backpack where it was, thinking the owner might come back for it. But as we packed up and started walking, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that the backpack had stirred in me. Something about it didn't feel right. About an hour into our hike, I suddenly heard rustling behind us. I stopped in my tracks and turned around, but there was no one there, just the stillness of the forest. However, I noticed some branches on the ground had been disturbed, as if someone had just passed through. I told my girlfriend, and she began to look around nervously. We both felt a growing sense of tension and decided to pick up the pace, eager to reach our next camping spot. As we hiked on, the air seemed to grow heavier, and my girlfriend became visibly uneasy. She kept glancing over her shoulder, as if expecting to see someone following us. I, too, felt like we were being watched, but every time I listened carefully or looked around, there was nothing, just the occasional rustling of leaves in the distance. Then, out of nowhere, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I froze, my heart pounding. The signal had been weak on the trail, almost non-existent, so I wasn't expecting any messages. When I pulled out my phone, I saw a blank text. No number, no content, just an empty message on the screen. I showed it to my girlfriend, and she looked just as confused and frightened as I felt. How was it even possible to get a message here? We didn't speak much after that, just quickened our pace, determined to get off the mountain as soon as possible. 2 hours later, as the tension started to ease, the unthinkable happened. As we rounded a bend in the trail, I saw it. The same backpack lying on the ground ahead of us. We both stopped dead in our tracks. It was the exact same backpack we had seen that morning, sitting there as if it had been waiting for us. My heart raced as a deep sense of dread filled the air around us. "This can't be happening," I muttered. We had left the backpack far behind in the valley. How was it now in front of us? We stood frozen for a moment, not daring to approach. The forest around us was silent, and there was no sign of anyone else nearby. The backpack felt like an ominous presence, as if something or someone was toying with us, watching from the shadows. "Someone's following us," my girlfriend whispered, her voice shaking. She looked around anxiously, scanning the trees for any movement, but the woods were eerily still. We didn't waste any more time. Without a second thought, we turned around and started heading back the way we came. The only thought running through my mind was to get down the mountain as fast as possible. We didn't touch the backpack again, and we barely spoke, our footsteps quick and urgent. As we hurried down the trail, the sound of rustling leaves seemed to follow us, growing louder and more frequent. Every time we stopped to listen, the noise would cease, as if whoever or whatever was trailing us knew to stay just out of sight. My nerves were on edge, and every small sound made me jump. About half an hour later, my phone buzzed again. I pulled it out to see the same blank message, once again with no number or content. Fear gripped me as I realized this wasn't just a glitch. It felt deliberate, like someone was sending us a message we couldn't understand. We broke into a near run, not daring to look back. The sense of being followed was overwhelming, but I couldn't bring myself to stop and confront whatever might be behind us. Hours later, as the daylight began to fade, we finally reached the base of the mountain. Exhausted and terrified, we made it to our car, hearts still racing. As we looked back up the mountain, the trees were shrouded in the growing darkness, the silence even more oppressive than before. I couldn't shake the feeling that the backpack was still there, waiting for the next hikers to come along. Though we made it down safely, the experience left a deep scar. Who had left that backpack, and why did it keep reappearing in front of us? And those strange blank messages, what were they trying to tell us? We'll never know the answers to these questions, but what I do know is that the mountain didn't feel as peaceful as it had when we first arrived. There was something lurking in those woods, something that didn't want us there. My friends and I decided to go camping by a remote mountain lake, far from civilization. The lake was crystal clear, surrounded by tall trees, and it seemed like the perfect spot to escape the noise of the city and enjoy some peace and quiet. We had packed plenty of food and gear, planning to spend the night by the water, enjoying the stars and a campfire. When we arrived at the lake, the view was stunning. The water sparkled under the sunlight, and the mountains surrounding the lake created a breathtaking backdrop. We chose a spot close to the shore, set up our tents, and started preparing for the night. The afternoon was peaceful, with lots of laughter and relaxation by the water, and everything seemed perfect. As evening approached, the sky began to darken, and a light mist started to gather around the distant hills. We lit a fire and sat around it, eating dinner and chatting as the last bit of daylight faded away. The lake reflected the stars, and the atmosphere around us grew eerily quiet. Then, one of my friends pointed toward the opposite shore. We all looked in that direction and noticed a shadowy figure standing on a small hill, its outline barely visible. At first, we thought it was just a trick of the light or maybe a tree, but the figure didn't move. It just stood there, seemingly watching us. We called out a few times, trying to see if it was another person, but the figure didn't respond or move. One of my friends suggested it might just be an oddly shaped rock or tree trunk, so we tried to shake it off and continued our conversation around the fire. However, as the night deepened, the presence of that figure on the hill started to gnaw at us. It remained motionless, and the longer we stayed, the more unsettling it felt. The air grew colder, and the fire began to die down. Finally, to ease our nerves, we decided to call it a night and retreated to our tents. As I lay in my sleeping bag, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The stillness of the night seemed oppressive, and it felt like something was out there, watching us. I finally drifted off to sleep, only to be jolted awake around midnight by a loud, heavy splash, a deep thud as something hit the water. My heart raced as I sat up, trying to make sense of the noise. It wasn't the typical sound of something small falling into the water. It was a loud, heavy splash, like something large had dropped from a great height into the lake. My instincts told me something was wrong. I nudged my friend awake and whispered, "Did you hear that? Something's in the lake." He rubbed his eyes and nodded, confirming that he too had heard the noise. We quietly got out of our tents, trying not to wake the others, and stepped outside. The cold night air hit us immediately, and we scanned the area with our flashlights, aiming toward the lake. The water, which should have been calm and still, was now gently rippling, disturbed by something. The light from my flashlight revealed faint ripples spreading across the surface, though there was no wind. A chill ran down my spine. That splash had been too loud, too deliberate. I instinctively pointed my flashlight toward the opposite shore, where we had seen the figure earlier, but now it was gone. The hill stood empty, and the shadowy figure had vanished. We stood there in silence, watching the lake, trying to find an explanation. But the water was calm again, as if nothing had happened. The night was quiet, save for the faint lapping of the water against the shore. Yet the unease lingered, growing stronger the longer we stood there. Unable to figure out what was happening, we decided to return to our tents, but we couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. The rest of the night was sleepless. Every creak of the tent or rustle of leaves had me on edge, and the memory of that loud splash kept echoing in my mind. At dawn, we packed up our gear as quickly as we could, eager to leave. The lake, now bathed in morning light, looked as peaceful as ever, as if the strange events of the night had never occurred. Just as we were about to leave, I glanced back one last time at the still water. In that moment, I heard it again, a distant, faint thud, like something falling into the lake, but much further away. I didn't bother trying to figure it out. We quickly left the area, walking fast, not daring to look back again. Even though the lake had returned to its peaceful state, the eerie splash and the disappearance of that shadowy figure haunted me. What had we heard? What had we seen? I still don't have the answers, but I know I'll never go back to that lake. Something unnatural lingers there, hidden beneath its calm surface. That's today's story. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe to my channel, and turn on the notification bell. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.